We're going to be recording this session, so just wanted to let everybody know. All right, I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to our March PTSA general meeting. We're glad that you're joining us here tonight. We have another great night with speakers, so we're looking forward to getting to that very shortly. I wanted to start off with letting you know about some PTSA vacancies that we have. Our elections are in May every year, and so our nominating committee was just stood up, and you probably saw the email that went out with the nominating committee information. If you haven't, we will provide that. So for our executive board, you can see the positions that are showing. We have our treasurer position, our corresponding secretary position, and our VP, our second vice president position. The corresponding secretary is the coordinator for PTSA communication. They're centrally involved in all the communication that is going out of from the PTSA. They work with the newsletter coordinator and the social media coordinator, the website coordinator. So it's really bringing it all together, and it's working together as a team to coordinate messaging on behalf of the PTSA. So we are looking forward to getting that position filled. Our vice president, our second vice president position, is involved in a lot of planning and coordination of various activities and events. For example, mock SATs and ACTs is one. We have an upcoming film viewing of Screenagers that DEPA has put together. So there's many different activities like that. And then of course we have our treasurer position, which is certainly somewhat of a demanding position, very important position to manage the finances of the PTSA. So these are all executive board positions. The executive board positions are the positions that we hold elections for in May. And if you are interested, or you know somebody who might be interested, please direct them to the, or yourself go to the nominating committee. And again, the message did go out with that information. We really need your help. Volunteering on PTSA is very rewarding. It's a great opportunity to give back to the school. We provide a lot to the school, and we really need your support to be able to make that possible. It's a lot of work if it's only a couple of people working on it, but if we have a full team, we can do great things. So we really hope that we can get full slate of candidates for those positions.
And Brian, I just wanted to, sorry to interrupt, just mention that that information is on our website. It's on the meetings page. So right here, tonight's meeting, the playback will be available here after the meeting. And then you can see down here all of the different vacancies and all of the email addresses for the nominating committee, so that if you're interested in a position, you can contact any one of us. There's also a link, which this page is also on our website, that discusses what these positions entail, kind of a recap of what Brian just stated.
So thank you, Nikki, and thank you to our the members of our nominating committee. We appreciate you serving in that for that activity. In addition to the executive board positions, we also have board positions, and there's multiple positions. So we do have a monthly board meeting, and that's where we coordinate PTSA activities. We have the MCCPTA Wootton Cluster Coordinator position. So that position is really managed by the MCCPTA, but we work very closely with that person. There's usually three, two are gonna stay on, and so we do have one opening for that position. The MCCPTA delegate, the delegate, Wootton has two delegates. They attend the monthly delegates assembly through the MCCPTA, and they have votes on the MCCPTA, so it's a very important position. So we want to get those filled. Our NCAAP representative is also open. That's a very key position, and there's activities going on across the county and our representative is very important to those events and activities that happen. We have our Patriots News Chair. That's our it's our newsletter that goes out on a periodic basis. In a normal year, we'd have it go out on a more regular basis, but during this year, we didn't have it go out as much because there hasn't been quite as many activities going on. Our fundraising coordinator was a new position that we created this year. Very important position to help us lead fundraising efforts. One of the efforts many of you may be aware of is the effort to raise money to purchase floor tiles for the gym to protect the flooring and to replace the tarp that in the past was used. So that is one effort, but it's completely open. We want to be able to have restaurant nights, whether it be carry-out restaurant nights, depending on what's going on, or in-person restaurant nights, but we want to be able to have a slate of fundraising activities. So that's a great position if you want to create your own activities. Social media coordinator is very important. That's how we get messaging out on Facebook and Twitter. And we'd like to do more with social media, add in some other social media channels as well. Our student engagement coordinator is open. Also a very important position to engage our students. And then our parliamentarian position is open as well. We probably will have some additional positions that are open that you'll hear about probably next month. But we'll certainly keep you posted on those as well. So please consider volunteering. We do appreciate it. And now I'm going to turn it over to Nikki to provide the membership and treasurer update.
Thanks, Brian. Give me just a second. I'm gonna share my screen. So I just wanted to give a quick update on the treasurer's report. Again, this report is always posted on our website on that meetings page I showed before. So if you want to see any of the treasurer's reports for any of the months that we've held a meeting, those are always on our website. So right now we're doing okay budget-wise, but because we now have the ability to hold virtual meetings with elections and with voting, we just received guidelines on that. We are going to be asking probably in our April meeting for some adjustments to our budget, just to kind of make room for that. Brian mentioned the Screenagers movie that we're going to be hosting for the school, a few things like that to add those to our budget. So now that we have the capability to make some adjustments back from August, we're going to be doing that during our April meeting most likely. And there will be more information that's sent out ahead of that meeting regarding that. As it notes at the top, I'll make that a little bigger, of the treasurer's report, through the end of February, we were at 964 members. So membership is almost where it was last year. So despite the pandemic, we were still able to maintain our membership overall, which is a good sign and why financially we've been in good shape this year. So that's it for that. But before I go, I just wanted to bring up the website just one more time, because I do get a lot of questions about where things are. And so I just wanted to make sure everybody has seen our website and that they know how to use it. So usually, like right here are kind of notes about things that are upcoming we have on the front page, and there's always links to different things. But again, any of the meetings that we hold that are recorded, those are always going to be here in the meetings page. And so after each event, I always post a video that you can play back. So if you missed the meeting, and usually I try to always include any materials that were discussed at the meeting, or if there were slides at the meeting or things like that. So the meetings page is really a good resources page if you weren't able to attend one of our meetings. And if you ever think that something is missing from this page, that you were at a meeting and you're looking for it, you can always reach out to me and I can make sure it gets posted or sent to you. So I just want to make sure everybody is kind of aware of this page, since there is a lot of information here. We will probably be making a few tweaks to the page soon, so look out for that. We're going to get a slightly cleaner look to our website, make it a little bit nicer looking, but right now there's a lot of information here. So probably if you're looking for something, it's on this page. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Bolden. She's going to give us some updates. And before she starts, I just wanted to make just a brief announcement that we're not going to be having our coffee chat this month, just because of, obviously, Ms. Bolden is under a lot of time constraints with the return to school, and there are a lot of parent meetings that are already happening because of back to school. And so rather than kind of taking her time and making it a little bit redundant to what she's already doing, we're going to skip this month, and hopefully we will pick that back up next month. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to her.
Thank you so much, Nikki. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. And thank you again to the PTSA for providing an opportunity for this meeting. And I just do have just a few updates. And as Nikki said, we're going to pivot and not have the coffee this month. But I do believe that between the parent meetings that we have upcoming before spring break and after spring break, I'm hopeful that we'll answer all of your questions. And of course, I'm just an email or a phone call away if you ever have any other questions in the meantime. And so what I would like to do is just sort of tell you where we are and what has happened since the last time we've been together, and then to give you some updates of what is to come. Most of my updates will be about reopening, but I'll also pivot and just give some specific information as it pertains to some of our grade levels. So first of all, last week we had our staff return to the building for the planning days. They had Monday through Wednesday to come back to the building to reacclimate to their classroom and see the building and start to understand how we've outfitted it for the return of our students. A huge thank you to the PTSA for providing lunches for the staff on that Monday. We really appreciate all your support, and that, of course, made a big difference for our staff coming back. And so once again, just your partnership in that way as well is really appreciated. In addition to staff returning, we do have groups of students who returned March 1st. Our SCB and autism students returned, and they are having a really great experience, and our teams there are just doing an excellent job. And then on March 15th, we also began to return a smaller group of students, students with IEPs in 12th grade, and also students who are involved in our CTE program at Edison, who are returning to Edison for that portion of their day to get their CTE credit. And so at this point, and also we've had our athletic program is ongoing. Our fall sports are underway. And again, I'm very pleased with what has been occurring for our students involved in the athletic program. And really all of these opportunities for these returns are really helping us to understand our plans, what's working, what we need to maybe pivot, and where we need to have some more thoughts about more students returning. And so I'm feeling really confident that we are working through all of the details that we need to work through to make sure that we have a safe and productive return to school. And so the next group that we are preparing for will be our 12th graders, who will be coming back after spring break. And there has been a slight change. The Board of Ed made a change in last week's board meeting that on Tuesday, April 6th, and Tuesday, April 7th, those will both be asynchronous days. So the first day that our first group of seniors will return will be April 8th now. And this was out of an abundance of caution and concern regarding spring break plans and making sure there's a longer period of time of quarantine before returning to school. And so we'll have all of this information on our website so that everyone understands which days, when our first group of 12th graders will return, and make sure that that's very clear. In addition to our 12th graders returning, we will also have 9th, 10th, and 11th grade students who have IEPs also returning during that first opening week at some point. And so that's what we're planning for, and continuing to work through the details of that. Again, because we are having a return by grade level, we plan both town halls for students and parent meetings this week and next week and the week right after spring break, so that we can give information to each grade level and tailor the information to each grade level. So this week on Thursday, we will have our first parent meeting, and our 12th graders are up first. So we will have a 12th grade parent meeting this Thursday at 7 p.m. And then we will be meeting with our 12th grade students in a town hall during homeroom on that Friday at 9 a.m. And that was another reason I had to push the coffee, because I want to be with our 9th grade students at that time. And that's when the homeroom occurs. So once again, this week we have our 12th grade parent meeting on Thursday at 7 p.m. It will be a webinar. Ms. Cocker has scheduled a Connect Ed call on Thursday night to give you all of the webinar information, and it'll also be published on our website. Of course, the primary focus of all of the meetings will be about reopening, but we'll also have a counselor present, and we'll also have information for 12th graders in particular about what our plans are for senior activities moving forward. So those would be the topics for 12th grade. And then just as a quick recap, on Tuesday, March 23rd, we will have our 11th grade parent meeting. On Thursday, March 25th, we will have our 9th grade parent meeting. And on April 8th, we have our 10th grade parent meeting. And again, we set these dates based on what we thought the return is. And so that's why we scheduled the 10th grade meeting after the spring break. And all of the town halls by grade level will occur during the 5th period. And those information will go out directly to the students. But our 12th grade town hall is Friday, March 19th. 11th grade is March 23rd. Our 9th grade is March 26th, and our 10th grade is April 9th. And so those are the town halls and the parent meetings. And again, we'll publish this in our weekly community message. We'll send out direct Connect Eds for each grade level, just reminding the community of when those meetings will occur. The next piece I wanted to just briefly mention is again about spring break, and just asking for caution and care in terms of any spring break plans that our students and community may have, and really looking at the CDC guidelines as it pertains to travel and as it pertains to safe and healthy practices. Of course, we are starting to transition some of our students back right after spring break. And so it's just really important that there's a lot of caution and care in terms of what kinds of plans our families and our staff and everyone may be participating in, and what that direct impact is on our school community. And so I'm just, again, out of abundance of caution and care, just asking that we really just be mindful and thoughtful about what those plans may be. And as I stated earlier, MCPS has made both Tuesday, April 6th and Wednesday, April 7th asynchronous days, again, out of an abundance of caution in terms of when we are transitioning back to school as it relates to spring break. So all of these events are primarily about our reopening. We've had some students in the building to help us to do some videos and tutorials for our 9th graders. That'll be part of the parent meeting and town halls that we do, but all of the meetings will have a video component so that students can really visualize, and parents can visualize what it will look like and what it is like now returning to the building. As always, we are committed to our virtual platform and all of the work that we've been doing across the entire school year to make sure that our students have a strong instructional program, and that will continue while we are pivoting and moving back to transitioning some students back to school. We have been working incredibly hard to make sure that that continuity of learning remains intact and in place, and that we don't experience any kind of glitches, hopefully, but technology is involved, so we have to be real as we're starting to transition back. And so with that, I want to just highlight a few other things that are happening in the school other than reopening, if you can believe that. Our juniors, it's a big time for our juniors, and there's a lot of counseling involvement happening at this time because we are beginning to work with our juniors in particular around their college plans. And just today, we had what we call our red folder meeting with all juniors through homeroom. And that is an opportunity for us to speak to students about planning for college and what kinds of information they will need to begin to think about and all of their options for college. And so I sat in on one of the red folder meetings today, and we have been able to, the counseling department has done a phenomenal job of making all of this information available virtually. And today, students met with their counselors to get an overview of the timeline for working with juniors for college, and just to give them a couple of assignments about what they need to do between now and in a couple of weeks, where they will begin meeting one-on-one with their counselors to really be specific about their college, about their post-secondary plans, and about what kinds of things they will need to begin to work towards for their college planning. So that happened today. And again, there will be some one-on-one follow-up with students to do some work around college planning. Our focus today was about college planning, but of course, we will be working with students around if their plans include a gap year or military or workforce. But today we focused on the college component of those post-secondary plans. And in addition, our juniors, there will be an SAT opportunity for our juniors. Junior parents should have received a couple of communications from Mr. Mamana regarding signing up for the SAT, which will occur at Wooten on Tuesday, April 13th. That day will be asynchronous for all of our other students, but for juniors who are planning to take the SAT at Wooten, that is the day that they will come and take the SAT at Wooten. And so it's very important that if we have juniors who are interested in taking that test, that we sign them up so that we can do our planning for making sure that we are socially distanced, 6 feet apart, and have enough space for all of them. So there's a lot of other things happening as well. And I know that we're all waiting for MCPS to give us the final decision as it relates to AP exams. There are a few options that this county is exploring in terms of how AP exams will be administered this year sometime in May. And so we are anxiously awaiting that decision so that we can begin to provide our families and our students, obviously, with more information of whether or not they will be testing in person or if they will be virtual. And so I just wanted to let you know that that's on our minds as well. And as soon as we have more information, we will provide that to you. I did see a question in the chat regarding, is there a final date for juniors who need to sign up? It would be very helpful if we could have our juniors sign up by next week. We'll be making yet another announcement at the parent meeting on March 23rd, but we would love to be able to finalize our numbers before spring break, because this occurs pretty quickly after spring break. So if you've not had an opportunity to sign up, please do so at the latest sometime next week, so that we can finalize our numbers and make sure we have everyone accounted for. So we will provide another update on APs as soon as it becomes available. And also, there's one more question. Thank you. Can sophomores sign up for the SAT or mock SAT? At this time, the county is only focusing on juniors. There was a possibility that 10th graders could take the PSAT, but we've had to the county pulled back on that. So at this time, we're only planning for the SAT for juniors. And I can try to figure out if there's going to be another opportunity for sophomores. But just given our sheer volume of numbers, we already have over 200 juniors registered. And then when you only have 12 in a class, there's a capacity issue. And thank you, Nikki, for answering that other question about the PTSA and mock SAT. The PTSA does partner with local companies for the mock PSAT. But in terms of an official PSAT for 10th graders through MCPS, that will not happen this year right now. So those are my updates in terms of testing and what's coming up. I'd also just like to thank Dr. Lazarus. We had a really great fall show, production of the fall show on Friday. Our a cappella group, the Acatonics, they've advanced in the a cappella competition. And so in a lot of ways, we've been still thriving in this virtual environment, and the kids never cease to amaze me and all the things that they're doing. I'll also be giving some updates soon about the extracurricular portion coming back to Wootton. We do have an opportunity to bring some extracurricular events, extracurricular activities back in person when schools open up after the break. And so we're working through that as well. It's just like, we're going to do it all at one time. No, not really, but we're going to pace that out. But we will have an opportunity to follow up with some of the extracurriculars. I think that is all I have for right now. I would also, again, like to thank the PTSA for having this meeting tonight and focusing on public health. And I'm so excited to listen to Dr. Austin and Dr. Gedden, and I hope I have your name correct, to hear about all of what's happening in our community around public health. So once again, thank you, PTSA, for all of your work and partnering with us. And I hope everyone has a great evening.
Thank you, Ms. Bolden. So we're very excited about the program to come. I did want to invite you to come out for or join the Zoom for our April 20th PTSA meeting, when we are planning to have college admissions counselors talk about the college admissions process. We know there's been a lot of changes, so please join us for that meeting. That's April 20th at 7 p.m. Now, we are pleased to bring you two public health experts. We'll have a panel, and I am pleased to welcome our moderator, Shruti Jappi, who's a staff scientist at the NIH National Institute of Mental Health, the Intramural Research Program. So, Shruti, over to you.
Hi, thank you, Brian. And I want to just first thank the PTSA for arranging such a timely panel discussion about COVID-19, vaccine, public health, and the like. And it is my great pleasure to invite the panelists now. We have two experts, as Brian mentioned. So I'd like to first invite Dr. Elodie Gedin, and I hope I did not butcher the name. Please.
You did not. It's a miracle. Very well.
Well, welcome. So you all have received the bios for us panelists today, but I'll just briefly introduce each of them to say mostly that Dr. Gedin is a senior investigator at the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Diseases. And you may know NIAID as, because Dr. Fauci is the director of that institute, and has been at the forefront of a lot of COVID-19 research. And Dr. Gedin's research essentially involves around, she's a virologist and parasitologist by training, and has mostly done research involving respiratory virus transmission and evolution. And that's most pertinent to us today as we talk about COVID-19. Before joining the NIH, she joined the NIH in the middle of the pandemic in May of 2020. And before that was a professor at NYU. So welcome. I'm really happy that you are here, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. I would also like to invite now Dr. Alexander Austin. Thank you for joining us. He is a board certified family physician currently practicing in Sarasota, Florida, which is likely at least 30 degrees warmer than here. As background, I just want to indicate that he got his medical degree from the American University of Antigua and did his residency at Loyola University. He's also served as a U.S. Air Force family medicine physician for 4 years before this. So welcome, both of you. We look forward to hearing great insights from you about COVID-19. So without further ado, we'll jump right into a couple of questions that will just get us started. I do want to invite people, if you have questions, feel free to post them in the chat. We'll be monitoring the chat throughout this evening. And if you feel up to it, you could also raise your hand and unmute and ask the question. So I will get us started because in Montgomery County, we're doing quite well in terms of vaccinations. We have about 230,000 people have been vaccinated in the county with their first dose. 120,000 have been fully vaccinated, which is great, which is a great start. And so vaccination is at the forefront of all our minds at the moment. And as we all, we're in group 1C right now, and eventually we'll all get hopefully the chance to sign up. So could we talk a little bit about the three options that are out there right now? We have the J&J vaccine, the Johnson & Johnson, we have the Pfizer, and then the Moderna. So if you wouldn't mind, perhaps maybe I'll start with you, Dr. Gannon, just to talk about the three different vaccines in terms of how they work, side effects, and things that we should just in general know about while we make decisions for vaccination.
Okay, so in general, you don't really have a choice of which vaccine you get. That being said, sometimes I know in this area, if you decide to go to Baltimore and get your vaccination at the stadium, it's actually the J&J that they give there. Now, there are different places they can be giving the Pfizer, the Moderna. So what you need to know is that Pfizer and Moderna are similar vaccines in the sense that they use the same idea. If it's been said a lot in the news, but sometimes, it helps to hear it again. And even if you have details you want to know, don't hesitate to ask. But the way they work, what's novel, and that's something a point I really want to make tonight. What's novel about these vaccines and why people are a bit hesitant to get vaccinated is because we hear all the time that vaccines take decades to be developed. And here were these vaccines that were developed so quickly. So the first thing I want you to know is that in fact, these types of vaccines have been in development for a long time because of the SARS epidemic that we had a few years ago and even over a decade ago. There has been a lot of work on vaccines that are for SARS specifically, so that when this pandemic occurred, when this new virus emerged, there was actually already an understanding of what gene or what protein to target and to have in a vaccine. So that already accelerated the process by many years. The second thing that is a novelty is the way the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines are made is that they are completely novel in our use of vaccines, is that they basically are based on only taking a small portion of the genome of those viruses, specifically the gene that encode the surface protein, because that's what your immune system will recognize first. And it's the delivery mechanism that is completely novel. It's instead of being a live virus or even a killed virus that is injected, it's actually a bubble of oil in which the RNA molecule is, and then that oil is injected. And, it's lipids. Our body is used to seeing lipids, and the delivery mechanism is done in the muscle so that you can actually have the muscle cells that are then receive the RNA molecule that will go into the cells. And then your cells will start producing the protein that is a virus protein, but it's just another protein for your cells. It doesn't really have a function. It doesn't do anything. And what happens is when that protein is released into your blood system, which naturally occurs with what your cells are doing, your immune system recognizes it and says, oh, this is not something I've seen before, and produces antibodies against it. So what was the real novelty in these vaccines was really this delivery mechanism. And that's why there's also a bit of redness at the location with all vaccines. But in the case of these two vaccines, there's a little bit more of an immune response because the lipids end up being like what we call an adjuvant, where it stimulates your immune system a little bit more. And that's why they're highly efficient, by the way. So it's all part of the process. So when you actually have a reaction where your arm is red or you're feeling a little feverish, that actually means your immune system is working really well. And so if you're amongst the people who have had the Moderna or the Pfizer, what often happens is that it's at the second dose that you actually can feel really under the weather for a few days. And it happened to me actually for a whole day after the second dose of Moderna. I don't know about you, Shruti.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
But I felt terrible for a day, but then the next day I felt like $1 million. So it was great, you know. So the J&J is that vaccine is more traditional. It's more like what we've seen all our vaccines, and it's based actually on a virus, but it's not the SARS virus that you're getting. You're getting a complete innocuous virus that your body has seen 1 million times. You've actually, you know, seen it before. It doesn't make you sick. It's an adenovirus. And what the adenoviruses are often used in research to produce proteins that we want expressed. And so the adenovirus, in this case, you replace a gene with the SARS-CoV-2 gene that encodes the surface protein again, and then they infect you with this virus. I mean, by the way, we're all infected with viruses constantly. It's part of our lives to have viruses. And in this case, your body starts making antibodies against this one protein that your immune system hasn't seen before. So it works really well. We do hear, if you've heard in the news, they say that the J&J is not as efficient or efficacious, but in fact, it's not at 95% like Moderna and Pfizer, but it's at 65 to 70%, and that works totally fine. It's still protective. As a comparison, the flu vaccine is often at 60-65% every year, so it's totally fine. I don't know if you have specific questions you want to know, don't hesitate to ask or put it in the chat.
No, I think that really gets us started in terms of knowing what the vaccines do and why they're safe. I had also heard that the J&J vaccine, although it says it's probably 70 to 74% thereabouts effective, it may be because when it was tested in the community, there were new variants, which potentially may have I don't know, that's one theory out there. So again, I think the bottom line is that they're all three are effective and safe to do. Dr. Austin, is there, if there's something you wanted to add about that, and if not, I have a very important question about masks in a second. So anything you would like to add about the vaccines and vaccination?
Sure. And thanks for having us on board tonight. Be happy to answer any questions. No, exactly as you mentioned, I get this question actually quite commonly. What do we do? Is there a preference between one versus another vaccine? And a lot of times we see the statistics and we try to make our analysis or our basis on those numbers. But a lot of times when we look at those numbers, we're talking about the risk in terms of severe disease and risk for hospitalization requiring ventilator use. And so as long as we're combating that, again, I think all three very strong options.
That's great. Okay. So I'll switch gears just a little bit, and I want to talk a little bit about the, I guess the CDC came out a few weeks ago about the recommendation of double masking. And I bring this up because as we start sending our kids to school, these are things that parents are thinking about. So is that something that either of you could speak to about one, does it give you twice the protection? Is it a no-brainer? Are there any downsides? And how to do it properly?
Sure. So I think it's just looking at the data, what they've looked at, they saw that with the single mask, we're looking at about 45 to 46% effective in terms of preventing those respiratory drops. And that's what we're trying to do, right? Is prevent the delivery, the expulsion of the respiratory drops to other individuals or receiving. And by double masking, you can imagine we're just adding additional layers of barrier between us and other individuals. And the main risk is we have quite a population that are your kind of silent carriers. They don't know they have the active disease. And so every mechanism we can employ. I know early on, we had the plastic shields in combination with the mask, and now we've delved into the double masking, and they found them to be over 90% effective. Just when I have patients coming into the office, I've seen some people that look like they've been wearing the same mask for the entire year. So we gently remind them to change their mask, and now we add the double mask. It just helps as another layer.
Okay, yeah. Great. Dr. Guerin, would you like to add anything or?
I mean, just very quickly about transmission. I mean, it was described very well that it does protect you. It wouldn't be, you know, twice as protective. We can't really quantify it that way. But the fact is that the viruses can be transmitted in multiple ways. And most of the ways they are transmitted right now is through these droplets when you have these, you know, quick interactions with people. When you're in a room with someone for a long period of time, you have to remember that viruses are very tiny. They can go through a lot of fabrics and they can go out. That's why you need to cover your nose. You know, they can go out in various ways. And that's why, you know, being in a room with someone for a very long time, even when you're masked, you can increase your risks. And that's why doctors are actually at high risk, because they are often in rooms with their patients. And that's why they often have, I don't know, Dr. Austin, if you wear those, you know, super tight N95 type masks, but those are not fun to wear.
Not at all. So we will wear them if we're going into a known contact room. If there's a high suspicion that the patient has COVID and we're going to be testing them, then we'll wear the N95. Other than that, we wear more so the double masking and the surgical mask.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, so on that same kind of vein, I wanted to also ask, perhaps in your experience out in the field, Dr. Austin, or even, you know, in life in general, have you seen any drawbacks or side effects of long-term use of masking? Because this has been coming up now and then, and I mean, at the face of it, it seems harmless, but I'm just wondering if there's any research out there, or if there's any study out there that's looking at this and that you might know of.
I did look early on at studies specifically looking at long-term mask wear. And I believe because they are so thin, there's not a great decrease in oxygenation and the ability to still receive well-oxygenated air. There's definitely a concern with trapping of maybe carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, but I don't think that's been much of a concern. Looking at the studies that they have so far, looking at wearing the mask over and over a course of a year, I don't think that's been looked at specifically. We can always harken back to the surgeons that have to wear them in the OR for several hours at a time, and they tend to do pretty well. And then it brings the question, what about those with respiratory conditions, underlying conditions, COPD, respiratory ailments as a baseline? Definitely with the double mask recommendation, I think we definitely need to look at that information again and make a reassessment, because it is harder to transfer air through those. But what we usually like to recommend, especially with getting the children back to school, is start a process of desensitization where you have them wear the mask at home, have them wear it in their community. And that's a lot of the frustration with the mask, is having something on your face for quite a long time. So the sooner we can get used to that, it kind of helps to subdue some of that anxiety of mask wear.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I want to take a second to actually invite people to, if you have questions, anything you want to ask the experts, please put it in the chat, and we'll ask as we go along. I actually have one just pop up. Brian would like to know how effective are air purifiers in the room. If you're spending a long time in a room, for example, would an air purifier help? And then, of course, opening a window to try to create circulation of air. Are those valid options for being in a room with somebody for an extended period of time? Masked, of course, but are there other ways we can minimize exposure?
So the air circulation is probably the best way you can do it. As for air purifiers, the ones you buy on the market that we have in our homes will not remove viruses, no matter what they say on the box, where they say 99%, whatever, it's all BS. The only thing you would need is actually these super air purifiers, which are, incredibly industrial level. That's what they have in airplanes, by the way, and they've had them for actually a long time. And that's why the risk in airplanes is much lower than you would imagine, because they do purify the air constantly. But what you have at home, do not rely on it as an air purifier. It may help with pollen, it may help with dust. It may not help that much with bacteria either, and definitely not with viruses.
Okay. Yeah, great to know that. So I think as we talked earlier about kids starting to come back to school, that already feels like we're going in the right direction in terms of getting back to some sort of normalcy. I think, seeing the school bus drive up to the end of the street yesterday was, I think, a sigh of relief for all of us. But that's, we're just at the beginning of it, trying to come back and start normal activity. Do you have any sense of, how long this may take us? I know vaccination is one part of it. Continuing to mask and physically distant is another part of it. But in your expert views, like, where are we potentially in this long-term project? Either one of you?
Do you want to take it? All I can say is that vaccination is definitely the key to all this, is vaccinating the populations at risk. Of course, ideally, we would want children vaccinated, but that will take a much longer period of time. They are doing the clinical trials with, they're working their way down in the age groups. It's totally understandable why they did not start with each age group category, because you want to make sure the vaccines are safe, even in older individuals, and then you work your way down, and they're doing quite a lot of studies right now on teenagers. Both Pfizer, I think, is ahead of the game. Moderna is slightly behind. J&J hasn't even started. And I think the goal is to eventually, towards the fall, have probably a vaccine available for children or young teenagers, and eventually down to 6-year-olds. So I think we will get there quite quickly. I'm pretty optimistic that the fall will be a good time, that children will be able to go back to school in the fall, because there will be a large proportion of the population, the adult population, that will have been vaccinated. And what happens is that children are often, although children can get sick, as we know, about 10% of children who have had COVID have been very, very sick, but they are very good carriers also. And so it's been a big risk of infecting other family members as they interact in schools. And as an example, because I do a lot of work on flu transmission, during the Christmas holidays, or the winter holidays, there's no flu, because children, you see my dog having fun, sorry about that. You see children that are bringing flu back home and transmitting through the schools. And so it is highly efficient when you have any kind of epidemic or pandemic to close schools. And sadly, that's what we've been living. But I'm pretty optimistic. I don't know what Dr. Austin thinks.
Yeah, sure. So I have, I guess, a unique perspective, being we're actually out here in Florida, and it's an interesting, looks like an ongoing experiment nationwide in terms of each state's response to this virus and this pandemic. Whereas the Florida schools, they did allow children to go back to school quite early. Um, and it was a long discussion with me and my wife and our children about returning them to school so early when we didn't have access to a vaccine. We didn't quite have great treatment plans or treatment options for this virus. But what it does to the child's psyche as well, just being home and doing everything remotely. We decided to get them enrolled in school, and they did do quite a great job in terms of contact tracing, identifying children that have been in prolonged proximity with other individuals that may have resulted with a positive. And I haven't looked quite at the national studies. I know Florida's still on the top of the list, top 3 to 5 in terms of the viral load. But I think with the gradual transition, Pfizer, I think, has vaccines available for 16 plus, and Moderna's working on the children as well. It's going to be a slow transition. It buys us time to continue to flatten the curve, as we've all heard, allows us to develop new techniques at combating the virus, and then keep our ERs and ICUs empty so we can manage those that are ill.
Right. And I think the mantra at the NIH has been, yes, you have been vaccinated, but you still continue to do the 3 W's, which is wear a mask, watch your distance, and wash your hands, right? So none of those behaviors will change after we get vaccinated. In fact, we should just have to continue to be vigilant about that. But getting to 60-70% vaccination of the population is where I suppose is the target for the fall. So that would be the new normal at that point, I suppose. So we have a couple of interesting questions in the chat that I will, let's maybe target the one about how one, so this is actually right, very similar to what I just said, which is after vaccination. So post-vaccination, could you talk about how one could gather indoors or outdoors? Like if you receive the vaccine, should you wear a mask? And the answer to that is yes. Yes. And something about whether vaccinated households can gather together and be called low risk if everybody has been vaccinated.
Correct. Yeah, that's what the CDC now is advising. So I think there was a scream of joy. A lot of people when we heard that, right?
Right. So in the pods, and if everybody in the pod is vaccinated, then it would be safe to, within that household, go about without masks. Yeah.
Correct.
There's one from India about double masking and what is the appropriate way to do this. So would pairing a paper or fabric mask with an acrylic mask that of course covers the nose and mouth, is that an effective way of double masking?
So the acrylic, can you not breathe very well through acrylic? I don't know how I don't know how well, but you know, I would advise, and Dr. Austin, I'm sure has better advice than I do on this, but in general, a paper plus you can put your fabric on top so that you keep the fabric inside of the fabric mask clean. And this way you don't do like some of Dr. Austin's patients who are reusing the same mask and it's dirty. So that I think is a good way. And I see in the same, India was also asking about whether the ears are an entry point. They are not. It would be wherever you have mucus surfaces. So the eyes, the nose, the mouth. You're correct that you can do transmission in the eyes, and you'll see one of the symptoms can be red eyes, and some people have caught it through the eyes, but not through the ears.
I see. Okay, great questions. Thank you. Please keep them coming so we can have a robust discussion. Dr. Austin, in your practice, have you seen, I'm not sure what age groups you typically see, but in your experience, how have you seen the gamut of symptoms in terms of COVID? Have you seen children? If you could talk a little bit about your experience in the field, that would be great.
Absolutely. So right now, being primary care family medicine, I take care of the wide range from newborns all the way up to, I think my eldest patient is 101,
Wow.
and she's doing well so far.
That's great.
We've we work in a multi-specialty group with a lot of primary care as well, and so we get to exchange ideas and talk about kind of what we've interacted with. And early on, what we found was a lot of the children were actually being found positive after their parents came to us ill. So we decided to test the entire family, and that's when we were finding that maybe the child was sick. Um, and like you mentioned, we see the gamut. I've seen quite a few long haulers, those that have caught the virus and they're unable to really shake the symptoms. They may have persistent fatigue, headache, malaise, just generalized unwell feeling, and this can last upward of months. I think they're even looking at even potential cardiac or our neurological side effects that we're still really exploring and learning about long term. A lot of these can happen with any virus. I don't know if this is unique to COVID, but again, there's still so much. We're all learning at the same pace, and children seem to rebound from it actually quite quickly. Um, Again, sometimes they may be those asymptomatic carriers that we'll just monitor for.
Yeah. So just two quick follow-ups on that. So do we know what percentage of people who come down with COVID-19 are long haulers in general? Is that?
I've not looked at that data. I'm not 100% certain.
Yeah, I don't think they know just yet. I think we'll know very soon because they're finding a lot of long haulers, far more, and they're usually a higher proportion of women are long haulers than men. There's women have a complete different immune response to infection, vaccines, and now, you know, as you know, Shruti, in the last few, maybe in the last 5 to 10 years, every study now systematically, you have to include, you know, males and females, be it in your animal studies, in your clinical studies, but that wasn't the case for the longest time. That means a lot of the drugs that are on the market were only developed, even vaccines way back when, were developed only for males. And so now, you know, things are adapted much better to females, but the long haulers, that they are seeing complete different reactions in males and females.
I see. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Not only men and women, but also, you know, taking diversity into account, race and ethnicity, and making sure that those studies
Oh,
are
yeah,
done equitably so that representative of the population.
that's right. It was white males.
Yeah.
That's right.
Come a long way from the white males now.
Yeah.
So we have another question from Pam. I think this is directed at you, Dr. Gedden. Is
Okay.
it for a high schooler to get a vaccine? So I guess a high schooler would be 15 plus, 16 plus. I know the vaccine, the Pfizer one is for
They're
16.
testing it now. As Dr. Austin mentioned, they are doing clinical trials right now with not huge groups. It's about, I think, 3,000 kids in their clinical trials. But we will know, I suspect, in the next couple of months, we'll know, you know, how well it works. So I suspect teenagers can be vaccinated in the late summer or early fall. That's my, you know, I suspect that will be the case.
Okay, great. So those clinical trials are ongoing.
They're ongoing for Pfizer, especially Pfizer. And I think Dr. Austin mentioned that it was ahead, that Pfizer was, yeah.
Okay. Fantastic. Do you know if the efficacy of vaccine for children, so let's say, do we use the same standards for children and adults, for example? So
That's a very good question. I think it is, in the sense that when you do an efficacy study, what you look at is you, so what's difficult with these clinical trials is that it's better when you're in the middle of a pandemic, simply because you need the numbers. Now, unlike animal studies where you have an infected group and a control group, you can't do that with humans, right? You can't infect or even, somebody that's an animal that's been vaccinated, you can then challenge them with an infection to see if they're protected. And of course, we can't do that with humans. And that being said, there are studies in the UK where they do that with flu, and they are doing that now with SARS-CoV-2 on young populations. But for our purposes, it's not done that way. So what you need, and that's why these clinical trials take a long time, is that you take a random group of individuals and then you vaccinate half of them, and then you have to wait for somebody to get infected or not get infected, but you need to have the epidemic going on so that you can, or you have to wait a long time. And then you have to wait for the number of positives in your control group. So it would be the same idea where you would need the same proportion of vaccinated that are more protected than the control group that's unvaccinated.
Okay, that's good to know. There's a question about whether blood type has any influence on the response to the virus.
So very early on, I would say April 2020, there's a study that came out specifically on that, saying that blood type group A positive, which just happens to be my blood group, was particularly at risk. And I was like, well, this is odd. So then it was refuted, no, blah, blah, blah. And then a little later, then people started saying, oh, there may be something there. I haven't followed the literature. I actually, when I read that question, I thought, oh, maybe I should look that up again. Now, there is a genetic component. They have found, if we ignore blood type, but if we look just at the genetic component, there is a genetic background that seems to protect you more or less. And supposedly, if you've done 23andMe or any of these kinds of genetic tests, you know how you can have a proportion of Neanderthal genes. Well, there's an association between the proportion of Neanderthal, genes you have or markers that you have versus no Neanderthal that are either protective or not protective. So I think there are studies that will come out saying that, your genome may actually, my dog is chewing on something, where it can actually, there could be a correlation between your genome and, the prevalence or the proportion of people who have infections.
Okay.
I believe I saw something similar where, like you mentioned, the A type were more likely to have severe disease versus the type O were less likely to have severe disease. I would just use that as evidence to really get the vaccine and make sure we're all covered.
Right, very good.
Yeah. So I have a question about something similar to blood type, but or your genetic makeup. There was also early on in the pandemic, there were some reports about having previously either been exposed to certain types of infections or having been immunized to certain diseases, that may offer you some kind of cross protection. Has that been looked at more seriously? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't think it's true. I think initially it was because in the population, we actually have epidemics of coronaviruses, human coronaviruses. There are 6, we're now at number 7 with the SARS-CoV-2. So 3 of, actually we may be at 8, but anyway, there's 4 human coronaviruses that are, some people, you can have a cold and be a little sick, but they're genetically quite distant from SARS-CoV-2, and they do not offer protection. But initially it was thought that it did offer, because when you do a certain diagnostic assay, there was cross reaction because of that spike protein. There was a little bit of cross reaction. That's why the thought was that maybe people who have had one of the human coronaviruses infections. But 99% of us have had a human coronavirus infection. And, as we know, 500,000 people who died were not protected, and they probably had coronavirus infections before. So I think that was refuted.
Okay, that's good to know. So more reason to go get vaccinated.
Yeah, so the one thing though that, and I don't know if that fits with what you were saying, but if you are immunocompromised in some way, you can be infected and shed the virus for a very long time. And so people who have, some kind of immunocompromise, heavy compromise, which can be due to infections, are far more at risk.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah. In terms of the vaccination itself, hopefully more of Montgomery County in the next few months will get the chance to be vaccinated. And the side effects, as when we first started the discussion, we talked about side effects. I've also heard that the side effects kind of depends on age. And so sometimes the younger folks may get a stronger reaction to it versus somebody who is more elderly. Is that just because of the immune system being more robust? Has that been studied? Is that just a known fact? Could you talk a little bit about that, please?
From what I've seen, at least from the clinical side, I'm actually noticing my younger individuals having a more robust response and probably more of a lingering headache, kind of the flu-like symptoms, but that also dissipates within about 24 to 48 hours. And they can easily mitigate that with Tylenol, ibuprofen, and just kind of resting for a day.
So it's a good sign, really, to be getting that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good
Not
sign.
to be worried about those side effects, because that just means that the vaccine is doing its job and your body is
Exactly.
preparing.
Yeah, and actually you can be a little worried when you have no side effects with these vaccines.
I see. Okay. Yeah, so I'll also invite people to please go ahead and put your questions in the chat. It's about 8:10, so we have about 15 more minutes or so to go. So please feel free, any question you have, please. I see Brian, thank you for that question. Brian's asking, do we know yet whether it is possible to get reinfected?
I think that has been confirmed.
That has been confirmed, right?
Very good question. Yep. We're seeing reinfections. What's not clear yet is whether it's reinfections. We'll know more very soon, but there's some cases where it's actually people who are long haulers, not in the sense, because when we say long haulers, it's mostly that you have symptoms even though you don't carry the virus anymore, and you just have symptoms for a very long time, for months and months. But there are also the long shedders, so people who actually still carry the virus for a long time and can be positive for the virus, then they're negative, then they're positive again. And so we haven't been able to separate out just yet who is reinfected versus who is basically just carrying the same virus. And the way we can find out is with a genomic surveillance. And so these studies are being done. And I'm going to be right back, but I think my dog needs to go out. So
Sure.
I'll be back.
Yes. Yeah.
Dr. Austin, it's yours.
Yeah. So Dr. Austin, I think maybe did you want to add to that? Otherwise, I have another question in the chat that might be, we could
Sure,
try.
we could move on to the next question.
Yeah. Okay. So this is another great question, and you get vaccinated, but then they don't quite know what the duration of protection is. So do we know yet how long it lasts?
So of the, I want to say the 4 are available. I know we hadn't mentioned much the AstraZeneca, Oxford out of England. They usually after the vaccine, about 14 days after, you have that fuller immunity against the virus. They have not been able to pinpoint a time frame in terms of how long this is effective. Will it be an annual or a quarterly revaccination? And the major concern is how are we responding to these newer viral strains? I know Moderna specifically and a few others have been looking at maybe a 3rd injection to cover, say, the strains coming out of South Africa, out of Brazil. And I believe there is also some cross coverage with those vaccines as is.
Okay. Right. Yeah. So potentially, I mean, there, as you mentioned, maybe having an annual kind of much like the flu vaccine.
Exactly.
Is that a consensus in the field yet, or are we? So I see you nodding, Dr. Gideon. That
Yeah, I think we will end up doing annual vaccines, or maybe every other year. You know, this virus seems to be surprisingly, I was very skeptical with all these variants that were emerging. I'm like, yeah, it's a virus. Of course there are variants, but it does seem to change quite rapidly, far more rapidly than we expected. That being said, the vaccines are still protective, although, you know, they're still more protective than you would think they would be because of these variants. So it's not a huge concern yet. However, because of these new emerging variants constantly, I think that there will be annual vaccination. And because of these new vaccine platforms, it's easy to change the actual vaccine component. So that wouldn't be too hard.
So I have one other question about vaccination itself. So the immunity that it provides you, it helps you, it prevents you from getting very sick, I guess, is one way to look at it.
Correct.
Also prevent you, so say you did get exposed to the virus, could you then potentially not really get sick, but still pass it on kind of almost asymptomatically, right? So is that a possibility?
Yeah, that's what we're not entirely sure how much. It's probably a low probability, but it is possible that it happens. And that's why we advise people who are vaccinated to wear masks, not just to not get infected, but also to not infect others if they are infected and pass it on and they're asymptomatic. Now, vaccines in general, and this is true for flu also, it doesn't mean you can't get infected when you're vaccinated. It means that it decreases the disease severity, so disease symptoms. And so that's why that's why we advise people to get vaccinated every year for the flu, is that they can still get the flu, but they'll be, you know, they won't be on their, you know, on their deathbed. They'll basically be functional, but with the flu.
Okay. Great.
And to add to that, you did ask about kind of the vaccine and its efficacy. If you can imagine, we're over a year into this pandemic, and you still have people coming down with their first initial case being positive, and it's almost like Russian roulette, where we don't know how severe of an infection we're going to get. And so this is a barrier in the way of severe illness.
Yeah, and that, you know, that is the true analogy. It's totally Russian roulette. We have, except in, you know, very specific comorbidities, such as obesity, we know that is associated. We know, you know, smokers, you know, there's an association with severity of disease. But for the rest of the population, it's basically a complete crapshoot. We do not know who will be completely asymptomatic. I've met, you know, and I'm sure you have in your practice, people who are in their 80s, 90s, who like completely recover. And then you have a 25-year-old who is on a ventilator. It's very strange.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think we all watched your dog in the background.
I see the question about pets and the virus. Yeah.
Appropriate question about pets and the virus.
Very good question. And so it was thought early on that dogs, cats could be infected very easily by that virus. So dogs do not seem to get infected that much. There's only one reported case in China of an infected dog. I think cats are more at risk because they have like the right receptor, and there has been in a zoo, for example, a tiger that was infected. And we do see in animal studies that many different types of little mammals can be easily infected with that virus. They have like the right receptor for that virus. However, dogs seem to be fine, but if you have a hamster, I think they're far more at risk.
Okay, good to know. Yeah. Okay. Again, a reminder, if you have questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat or unmute and ask. I think, oh, here's a one from Supriya.
Oh, okay, that's a good question. No, it doesn't give you any protection against COVID. However, what it does do is protect you against flu. And if you're protected against flu, it gives you a better chance if you get COVID. There have been studies showing, they've done these studies in mice, they're doing them in other animals, that if you have a flu infection, recover, far more at risk for very severe disease when you get COVID. So it does sensitize you, and that's within the same, time frame or a few months. So the flu, although there hasn't been any flu circulating at all, and that's because we're all, distance, we're wearing masks, which just shows you that as we move on in the future, I've decided, I always thought it was odd seeing people wearing masks, like in airports and all that. But now I'm a big proponent. I always get sick when I travel. So now I'm a big proponent. I'm going to be wearing a mask.
That's great. Yeah. Yeah, it's we will not feel it abnormal, somebody walking down the street. During allergy season, for example, people wear masks, but now it just feels completely normal.
Absolutely.
We're embracing masks as into our psyche. Nikki has a great question about autoimmune disorders and whether, firstly, if a vaccine is appropriate and if whether one is better than the other.
I could chime in here. I would say it's going to be very individualistic. I would recommend speaking directly with your primary care, your internal med doc, because there's a wide variety of autoimmune disorders and conditions, and it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. I would say absolutely having a weakened immune system compared to the remainder. I would highly recommend that you're probably in first order having that discussion with your primary care. Maybe you're on an advanced list to get the vaccine a little sooner than the general population. But excellent question, I believe. Yeah, you should be more so at the front of the line and also have that conversation, especially if there's having that conversation about potential negative side effects from the vaccine, or if there's potential allergy to a component of the vaccine.
Yes, so I don't think there's a difference between the 3 vaccines that are available now, right?
No.
Yeah, so the AstraZeneca one, which is not available in the US, would be the one with the dead component of an adenovirus, right? Yes. So.
Yeah, the J&J is also an adenovirus based. They're just a different adenovirus.
Okay. Yeah. So we have a little bit more time, and I wanted to maybe talk about something that is on minds of everyone right now. The weather is improving. Cases are coming down in the county. Things are starting to open up, and we're all masking still, and we'll maintain distance, wash hands, and do all of that. But is there, what should we be paying attention to in terms of keeping an eye out for whether things are stable? Have we flattened the curve? Is it staying low? Things like that. The metrics are, they're published daily if one is interested in. But in general, trying to get back to normal life, if you had a crystal ball, how would you kind of look to, say, the spring and the summer, because those will be traditionally high travel times. People want to get out. We've been indoors for a year. Any advice for how to go about doing this safely and trying to come back to normal in some way? Dr. Austin or Dr. Gedin?
I'll jump in on this one. I would say as long as, if we're looking at hard data, looking again at the hospital metrics, sorry, looking at the how loaded our ER is, how many ICU beds and ventilators we have available, as long as we're not overloading the system, we could probably work towards getting back to some sense of normalcy. Again, this is a part where we're going to have to all come together, all hold hands, but socially distant. In terms of doing the right things as dictated by the CDC or our higher boards, where we're still implementing those safe mechanisms, keeping those around us safe. And those of us that can't really receive any vaccine, maybe due to allergy or a negative response, we're still protecting them as well.
Yeah. Dr. Gaydon?
Yeah, I mean, there's not much. I mean, we've talked about this, everybody has been talking about this ad nauseum. But, we just have to, I know it's uncomfortable, but wear the masks when you're traveling. And what's difficult is that some people are more comfortable with the idea that you are masking not just for yourself, but for your community. And I think this group, for example, just the fact you're here, you already have that mindset, your community mindset. And here it's with your school community. However, there are people in our world, in our community, who don't think that same way and who don't want to mask. And that's the issue we have, right? So as things open up, you are confronted with the fact that there are people who break that chain of protection that we're all trying to have. And that's where it becomes a little difficult. So when you reopen restaurants, you reopen traveling, you have to try to keep your family safe as much as possible. So just continue what you're doing. Is all we can say, keeping in mind that having been vaccinated will be that much higher layer of protection. But as just mentioned, there's some people who cannot be vaccinated. Little babies can't be vaccinated. People who have certain diseases, auto, or who are immunocompromised. Vaccination doesn't work. And so there's, that's why we have to continue to be vigilant and careful until there is that herd immunity we talk about, because herd immunity, what it does is that it stops the transmission of the virus to the people who cannot be vaccinated. You become a shield for those people. And that's what we're aiming for, this herd immunity. And every virus has a herd immunity that's different. So measles requires a much higher number of people to be vaccinated. And by the way, measles is the most infectious agent in the world. Measles is the worst of the worst. SARS-CoV-2 is actually not the worst of the worst. But so the herd immunity does not need to be at the level of measles. It can be a little lower to protect the population.
Okay. So I hear the message loud and clear is vaccinate when it's your turn, and continue to do the 3 W's. I think maybe we'll just, as the last question, Brian is talking about, this is actually really, really, yeah. When we do get a herd immunity, is it possible to still have outbreaks?
Yes, measles is a good example, right? Doctors always name measles as the example.
Right. Yeah. So it could start in a little group, and then it goes out of.
Yeah, if you see measles in California, in certain communities that, for example, do not vaccinate, you do get outbreaks. And so we can totally expect that SARS-CoV-2 will be like that until the virus. So what can happen with this virus, SARS-CoV-2, is like what happens with flu, or what happened with other human coronaviruses, is that initially we get very sick, but then we develop enough immunity that eventually they become pretty mild infections, which is possible with this virus. It's not the case for something like measles, but it's possible with SARS-CoV-2. We don't know yet.
Yeah, so
say
really
it's,
that, on that, oh, sorry, go ahead, Dr. Austin, yeah.
Sure. So I believe it's going to be a lot of learning to coexist alongside this virus. Now that we know more in the future, kind of stopping those outbreaks sooner rather than later.
Yeah, great. Yeah. So on that really optimistic note that we can live potentially in harmony with a really mild version of this.
Right.
I want to really thank you both taking time off on a weekday at night when you could be curled up on the sofa reading a book or watching TV. So thank you very much for sharing your expertise and just really answering all these questions that have been in our minds. So again, thank you. I want to thank the PTSA. Brian, should I hand this back to you?
I also want to thank you both. We really appreciate it. This was very informative for everyone. So thank you.
welcome.
Have a great evening, everyone. Thank you for joining our PTSA meeting for March, and we look forward to seeing you next month. Thank you very much.
Thank
Have a
you.
great evening.
Thank
Bye,
Bye.
everybody.
Take care.
And thank you very much, Trudy.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome. This was great. Thank you both. I really enjoyed the discussion.
Bye.
Yeah,
This was
Thank you.
great. The questions were great.
yeah, they're all thinking about it. This is
Yeah, very good questions. All right, nice meeting you.
Stay safe.
You as well. Thank you.
Bye.